Okay, the recording is started again. Uh, hey everyone. Yeah, in case if you're watching this from the YouTube, from the recording, so we discussed like the way we're going to organize our today's webinar. So because the English-speaking audience doesn't have uh, the recorded lecture about unit tests, we're mostly going to focus on unit tests today. But also we will take a moment to recap what we have at the moment about NgRx and state management itself. So if you would like to learn how to get started with NgRx, what the Redux is all about, how to install necessary packages and start developing using NgRx, you could refer to the lecture from the English version of materials. Here I tried to describe in details how to install the packages and start implementing the store management using NgRx. For now, we're going just to look through real brief on the key concepts, and uh, I will like try to show some tricks and tips uh, along with uh, with the following like article that I recently encountered and added recently. By the way, I will like double this link to our materials right here. So this article consists of numerous of best practices, including every NGRX feature. So I highly recommend you to look through the article and find out how can you apply the acquired knowledge about NGRX in real practice and how to do it in the right way. So for now, we will focus a bit on NGRX, and then the majority of time we'll focus on the unit tests. So we will like go through the process from the very beginning, and I will show you how to cover each building blocks of Angular by unit tests. Okay. So now, if you were watching my lectures from the Georgian RS School Run, from the English version, you might be noticed that we were using like the following application, which is to-do list management app. Yeah, I didn't do anything in terms of unit tests. I just want to um, quickly recap what we have in terms of NGRX, and maybe if I will have some comments, yeah, we will do it right away. So basically, installation of the NGRX is not quite complicated. What you need to know is that you need to install several packages. You don't need to install all of them. You could list all of them on the documentation page. But what you need to know is for the majority of cases, you need only some of them. These are NGRX Store, Effects, Store DevTools, and well, for some reason, you need also Rotor Store. It's not quite necessary, but I would also recommend having this in your daily project. Yeah, you just use ngCLI to add those dependencies, and then to start using it, you need to import the following modules. Store module, which enables you the overall state management. Here in the braces, we describe the root store, which is the global one. If you remember from the modules and services module, that the static module has like usually the two static methods. One of them is for root and the second for child. For root is used for root configuration whenever you do it for the first time in either AMP module or core module. But honestly, All these configurations I would prefer to do in the core module so that we could remain the app module as pure as it's possible. So by that I mean, so this store and this store declaration modules could be easily moved to the core module. But again, that's only the recommendation. And yeah, you could use any approach that is acceptable in your project. So here what we see, yeah, we configure the global state that is uses app reducer. Globally, we have no effects, but we do use them across the project, and a bunch of imports for configuring the router store. That's actually what it does. So let's say I have already um, the to-do list up and running, and we could inspect what the router store actually does. Yeah, we could use the Redux DevTools to debug what we have in terms of state and see what actions actually we're dispatching. Yeah, as we can see, whenever we are launching the application, there are some of the action that actually triggers the initialization of the both store and effects. And as you can see, there are some effects regarding router store. Usually, you will use like the router navigated uh, to reflect um, to the page's navigation. So there are actual several ways. Uh, how can we deal? How can we react to the route change whenever we navigated to another uh, page on the Angular application? Um, Two ways. First is through the uh, router service. Let's say uh, router has the following property that is called events, right? Events is observable, which is like has events each time whenever you perform the navigation. So we could see all the routing events whenever we enable them in the configuration. Here, uh, enable tracing. So whenever we deal with the navigation, we will see that the router actually will fire several router events, and all of them are passes through the router events right here. As you can see, yeah, there are some route events, and the very common case uh, when we want to use the route events is when the navigation actually occurs or start. So we could like uh, subscribe to it, see that the following events, and we could compare if event is instance of navigation and do some of the logic, right? Um, in NgRx, if you would like to use affects, there is the same way. How can we do that? So I don't have the core affects, but we could use any other affect just to show you how can we reflect to the router navigation. So we have one file with affects. Let's say we want to reflect to the navigation whenever the navigation actually occurred. So we could use a predefined router, if I'm not mistaken, router navigated. And then we can use uh, the following action. Uh, so yeah, this is like router error action, error payload. Let's say, we need the action router navigated action. It refers to a type. Okay. It's never, but never mind. And then we could like do whatever we want upon the navigation. So actually, what I'm trying to say is that there are actually two ways how can we organize the entire structure of our application. In case if we want to use the state management, our architecture will like look the following. All the business logic will be stored in the services. So the service will not only make the HTTP request, as well as do some auxiliary logic, it will also do some business logic. For example, reflecting to the navigations, doing some core stuff, and so on and so forth. And if we want to use the state management, especially in NgRx, our architecture will like look a bit differently. Our services will be used for auxiliary logic as well as for making the HTTP requests, and all the business logic will be handled inside the NgRx affects. So that in the NgRx or in the Redux architecture, the affect actually means that all the business logic will be handled right here through the dispatching of the actions and just making the request through the services. So our service now is like the middleware between the store or the user that dispatches the action and the backend. Not quite sure whether it's clear for now, but yeah, I tried like to give some words on this. Yeah, so that's actually one of the main differences between two approaches, and you need to choose one of these two approaches whenever you are uh, dealing with the application creation from scratch. It's actually, yeah, it depends on the complexity. So in even in case if you need some global state, and the state and the business logic is not quite complex. Possibly you could use just a service, right? Because we know that the service is the singleton. So instead of the NgRx store, we could easily create like global state right here, and it will be replace object, for example, and do whatever we want within this global state. Do some logic, and we're okay. In case if a logic needs to be split up among the feature modules and it's too complex to create just a single service for everything or multiple services, you could consider using the Redux architecture and set up NgRx. And yeah, it's also uh, has some major drawback in that you need to be more verbose and write lots of code to set up this architecture and introduce the new features. But yeah, there is no right choice. I would say there is no one silver bullet that will solve any problems. You choose the right way. How can you deal with the global state, with the business logic, depending on conditions and on your choice, right? If you see that the Redux architecture is the best choice, okay, you're free to use it. In case if you see it's too redundant, it's a waste of time, so you could just use the services and regular RxJS features. Uh, okay, so we're going back to the NgRx. Since we are on the reducer, just to remember that, remind that the reducer is simply a pure function that takes Yeah, from the from the syntax right here is not quite obvious. But yeah, initially we can describe the reducer as a simple function that takes state and action. Just remember, uh, action has type, which is or arbitrary string and some sort of payload. And this function will return a new state depending on which type is provided right here. Um, okay, I believe that it's uh, quite that is quite clear. Well, I just realized that the font could be too small for you, so I made it a bit larger. Okay, so selectors. You remember that the selectors are used for getting the part of the state. So instead of getting entire state each time, you could use the NgRx selector. Uh, there is also one magic, I would say, property of the selectors is memorization. So what does it mean? Um, Maybe let's demonstrate in terms of like the global store by showing you what we have here. So in case if we use selector just to get one single property, this one. Um, for getting one property, and in case if something other is changed in terms of the state, the selector will return nothing. Just to demonstrate this behavior, let's do the following. So if I'm not mistaken, whenever, toggle complete, great. Okay, just to demonstrate this behavior, we're going to refer here. Let's just add one simple console log here. I'm going to use tab operator and let's use console log. I will just print this property. Tab. Okay. I will just print this property right away. So when we cause the loading flag change, whenever we submit a new to do, right? So for some reason it's disconnected each time. I don't know why, but uh, yeah, maybe also let's disable tracing for the better printing. Yeah, that's really interesting. The app gets recompiled and then the web server disconnected. Interesting. But anyway, okay. We see that is loading. Firstly, sets its initial value. Then it comes true whenever we are fetching our to-dos from the backend, and it's getting false whenever we are done with fetching. And also, whenever we're toggling the completion of the to-do, we see that there is the action that we're dispatching, right? Which means that we actually changes our state. And if we take a closer look at the console log, we see nothing happens. Why? That's because is loading is not getting changed. So that's why the new value will not be emitted in case if it's not changed. So that's why the selectors come to the rescue, and that's an important feature, which actually works not with the primitives, not only with the primitives, but with any kind of object. So in case if in my state, let's say we'll have not the Boolean, but any object right here, it will also be memorized. So it's not about like the data types that are passed by the values or by the references. It's all about memorization. So it doesn't matter what the data type uh, is stored or is being get from the overall state by using the selector. I think that's a cool feature. Okay, another useful use case could be uh, maybe you already like ask the question for yourself. Okay, so we could get uh, anything. We could get the partial, only the part of our state, but is there any mechanism that could be used for passing the parameters to the selectors? Let's say we want to get uh, only uh, only the state under some condition. So I want to refer to the feature store, let's say right here. So let's say we could, maybe I'll refer to the following components. This one to the page, okay. We have to-do list overall, but we see that our to-do list is divided into two parts, right? So how can we achieve this? There is the to-do list filtered by the pipe. Okay, what if we want to have two separate observables right here? Uh, so there are two ways. So we could use uh, the same selector for everything. Let's say uh, uh, upcoming to-dos. Uh, well, perhaps that's not the right place. So maybe let's use this component instead. Yeah, upcoming to-dos. We're using the same selector, and by using NgRx, filtering out to-dos that are not completed. Sorry, not the filter, but map. To-dos, filter. Maybe it's quite obvious for now what we're doing. Item is completed. And vice versa if we want to make another list. Okay, that's a great solution. And remember about memorization of selectors. Each time when each list is getting changed, the selector will push our new value. What if we want to get parameter, right? We want to create a new selector, get upcoming to-dos, which actually is a function that will return create selector. The function will take the completion boolean as a parameter, right? And we will return by the same condition item great. We created the selector for two conditions, so we could use them to pass either it will be for upcoming or already completed. But remember that each of these two selectors uh, will, by using each of them, will trigger the state change through the subscription observable, only in case if something is really changed. So it could be useful in some cases. Great. Um, so I believe that's by knowing about the such feature of the selector could be useful um, in your future projects. Okay, I could stop for a moment. I see that there are several messages in the chat. What was the problem in previous NgRx lecture that DevTools didn't show anything? Well, honestly, I don't quite remember. Yeah, maybe I could like try to search for the references.
I have already answered this question. In a lecture, you have store model imported below store DevTools model.
Yeah, because well, right after the lecture, I fixed that issue, and I did like announce to everyone, but I don't quite remember because it was like in December, so that's why I was like hesitating in answering the question. So, NgRx Redux, yeah, but thank you for highlighting. I believe that could be important for everyone. So yeah, we see that for now, everything looks pretty clear and store DevTools module important in the right sequence. Yeah, thank you for letting me know. Hey, yeah, I see no other questions, so we can move forward. Uh, okay, we talked a bit reducers. Well, actions, I believe it's pretty clear. Uh, about providing in the feature modules. You see that's the same with the routing module that we use right here. We use the another static method for importing the module. The same rule applies for the feature modules of store and effects modules. What's the catch could be right here. Even though this store is global and it could be used anywhere from the application, you should bear in mind that this such state that is used, that is being provided through the invocation of for feature will be available only in case if the following module is getting loaded into the application. And since we're dealing with feature modules, so it could be a catch. For example, uh, for now, whenever we get navigated to the to-dos route, we see that there are two properties of the states, app, which is our global state, and to-dos. Okay, great. But what if we get redirected to another page? Let's say not found. So I believe the rules are correct. Yeah, we see that found page works. And we have only app state. There is no to-do state right here because this feature module is not loaded. So you should be careful in case if another feature module requests the state from the third feature module. So perhaps it's a high time to think maybe it's worth like moving the state to shared state to the global state. Yeah, at least some of them. Yeah, you see the to-do state is not available right here. Great. So effects, quite interesting, feature. You remember that effects actually is the set of the class properties that is the observable returning the action. So each observable that is created as an effect will react to the actions observable. And by using off-type operator, we're filtering all the actions, only particular action, and doing some logic. Okay, so this actions observable actually will, each time it will pass the as a value just dispatched action to the NgRx from any moment. Um, as well as the feature reducer, effects could be also provided as feature effects. And it means that the following effects will only work when the 2D module is being loaded, because it's a feature lazy loaded module. I believe it's quite clear. What I would like to emphasize here um, is that the majority of effects will use third-party services that also contain observable. The catch here is that if we will not get the nested pipe right here, and instead we will do like the following, let's say switch map to blah blah, and move this on the top. So we see, yeah, at the first glance, it's look perfect and the code is readable. But the problem here is that this effect will work only once. So whenever we will try to fetch to-dos once again, it will not happen. Not sure if, so perhaps maybe add to-do is the right place where can we do the same. Okay, let's do that. We'll remove pipe. Okay. Yeah, we see that it depends on the to-do. That's why I used right here. Not quite sure. Yeah, that's because of this. Yeah, I have the nested pipes. But we could try this with the fetching. Okay, maybe to demonstrate this behavior, let's and one more side effect and to the form. By clicking, we could try to check. So this is the custom validator. On submit your form, blah blah. Okay, this is form group directive. Great. So we could like what we do whenever we add the new to do. So let me memorize because I haven't dealt with this. So it just adds the new to do to the array. Right. Well, I don't think at the moment that we actually need to implement this. Yeah, you could try to experiment, but that could be a really interesting question from your side. Maybe if you already dealt with NgRx and tried to implement effects, why the effect is working only once? So the answer is because the switch map operator, upon submitting the value right here, actually it switches to a new observable that is getting completed. So if you remember that the HTTP client returns observable that is getting completed once the request is successful or failed. Because you already switched to another observable, the entire effect completes. And that's because you already switched to that observable. And in case if you will uh, do nesting piping, like in the following case, everything will work correctly. So just to memorize, that's in case if your action, if your effect works only once, just to do nested piping like the following. Well, so I believe that dealing with NgRx is not quite complicated. And if you already watched the lecture, you already seen how to get started. For now, I just wanted to highlight important notes in terms of NgRx. We already have some time passed, and if you remember, I was wanted to mostly focus on unit tests since there is no any lecture recording, and since you agree with me, so which is great, so we could move forward. But let's wait for about a minute in case if you have something to ask at the current moment. Okay, looks like no questions at the moment, so we could proceed. So, I believe that could be the lecture recording for future runs. Why not? We could switch from the workshop with trick and tips to the lecture about unit tests. So in case if you are using English version of materials, that could be useful, but I promise I will try it as concise as possible. Not to take much time and focus on the real stuff. Okay, so well, I believe you already know about why do we actually need a unit test, but uh, mm, rem- just to highlight that unit test actually keeping you the same whenever you're refactoring something. And this could be useful whenever you're doing massive refactoring and you want to ensure that you didn't forget nothing. I believe that's quite simple. Yeah, you already seen it. One more thing. Still, Angular 14 is the actual version, and it still uses the same technologies for unit testing. So the test framework as Jasmine and test runner as Karma. But I will recommend you to replace the following uh, uh, these two ones with the Jest, because Jest will be widely used across the project, and Jest is used not only on in Angular in any JS projects, and it's widely used in any other projects. So that's why you might be thinking that the Jest could be the solution. But yeah, for now, maybe let's revert the changes I already made, just in case. Yeah, as we can see from the changing list, I already made some changes uh, to the files. But for now, I'm going to revert some of them. Okay, yeah. So I already set up the chest to the to-do list management. So you could refer to this repository after I push it in case if you want to set up Jest in your local project. I don't know why Angular is still keeping with Karma and Jasmine, but yeah, maybe that's a high time to switch to Jest. The process is not quite complex. I will just look through all them. So we're just removing redundant files and logic. Here on Angular JSON, we have the description of the ng command that actually runs karma testing. Then I removed karma configuration and installed some of the packages. Well, that is required for just testing. We'll not like get too much deeper how to get started. I believe you could find the some of the articles about that. But yeah, that's not requires much effort. It just requires adding a proper configuration, and the Angular testbed could be easily used uh, with the Jest. And another thing that I've mentioned is that whenever you want to run the test, let's say from the WebStorm, or I have no idea whether VS Code has such plugins to run the tests directly from the spec file like this. Yeah, I did experience a problem with Karma because whenever I wanted to run just one single test, it runs the entire test suite, which is not quite correct. So here we see that I can easily run only one single test suite or one single test within this test suite easily, and it already uses the Jest. Okay, so yeah. So for now, ng-test will not work because we already removed the command from the Angular JSON. Instead, you could define just a simple package JSON script for running the test for entire files. Yeah, it's pretty simple, and it has like, well, Jest has more or less the same syntax. So maybe if you look into details, you will see the differences. But if you get used to writing unit tests using Jasmine, I don't think it will be too difficult for you to switch to Jest because it has about the same syntax. Okay, so first of all, uh, I would like to start with components, right? Yeah, we actually could refer to one of my examples just to show how can we test the components in terms of the test beds, right? So just a bit scale. Yeah, I just want to use first look from here. Okay, so the easiest way to get started with testing is to treat our components as the TypeScript class, right? So if you remember, the component is the combination of the TypeScript class and the HTML template. So if we treat as the TypeScript class, it's quite easy because we know that we could just create an instance of the class and test all the methods that this class contains, right? By invoking these methods and uh, comparing the results. It's pretty simple, right? Um, what if our class has third-party dependencies? Okay, that's not a problem. Again, we could treat the class as the component as a TypeScript class by simply putting this dependency as the regular object of appropriate type, right? Still, we don't have any problems with it. Uh, that's really great. But that's not quite a good option because Angular component is not about not only about the class, it's only about the template. So by considering just a class, we're getting away from the entire concept. So Angular components has its own life cycle. The template could be changed upon applying some configurations and the data. It has directive and pipes. It has built-in directives such as ngF, ng4, and so on. And in case if something is changed, we can't cover such cases by just instance testing. So that's why Angular has the solution. So for now, we'll get back to our app. It has its own solution, which is called the TestBed. So I need to take some of the components as an example. Okay, so for getting started, maybe let's take the header components. It's quite simple. It has only text. Okay, maybe you already noticed that whenever you create a new component via ngCli, it's generated a spec file in the following form, which actually already enables you with the testbed configuration. So actually, it means that each test you will run a separate Angular application with the configured module. So here is the module definition. Okay. And here we can put anything we want. We can import modules. We can provide services. This is actually the ng module. And each time it will run this separately Angular application, it will render our components, which enables us not only with the instance testing, but it also enable DOM testing as well, and that is great. So if we look through the whole file, I believe you're already familiar with such syntax as before each, before all, after each, and after all. I believe from the name of these hooks, it's quite obvious what is the purpose of it. As well as in case if you want to exclude some test suites or test cases from being executed during the whole test run, you could simply add the letter X at the beginning of the method. And this will exclude the following test case from being executed. Xdescribe will exclude the entire test suite from being executed. In case if you need just a single test suite to be executed, you could add letter F at the beginning as well as at the single test case. Okay, I believe that's clear. Moving on, we have two before each hooks predefined. In the first one, we configure in TestBed module, which accepts the module definition. And as we've seen before, it's the regular ng module. We're not going to change the logic right here. What we need to know is what's the entities we have on the components. First one is the component instance, which actually the instance of the TypeScript class. And the fixture, what is that? Actually is the special object that enables us to manipulate with the representation of this component. So what's the methods and properties it has? Let's find out. We can manipulate this in the following we could use, like, we can destroy it, check for stability, as we see here. But mostly you will use fixture for doing two things. Let's say by CSS one. You will use fixture for two things. First is to get the element, and the second one is to invoke detect changes. Why do we need that? Even though if the Angular automatically triggers change detection in the application. Well, in unit tests, it's not the case. And whenever something is changed, whenever you clicked something, right? Let's assign it. Let's maybe create a separate test case. Okay. So we got the element. Let's assume it's not stage one, it's button, and we could do the following. Okay, so because we do query all, we need a single element. We won't click it. There is the method that is called trigger event handler. First argument is the name of the DOM events, regular DOM events, or it could be the events that is created by event emitter as well. For now, let's say we want to click it. And upon clicking this, something is changed in our state. And the change detection is not triggered automatically. So that's why we need to call detect changes and then compare the results. Well, now we don't need that because we just want to compare that the H1 has appropriate text. Each debug element, by the way, by invoking query, H1 is the debug element, but we could easily get access to the native DOM element. And we could do like the following. Why do we need such syntax? We could easily do the following. Native element. Query selector as you get used, right? And this will work fine as we do it in the line 28. But what's the difference? The difference is by using Angular syntax, we not get tied to the exact platform. If you remember, Angular can be run in several platforms. It depends on which platform we provided right here. So whenever we declare the app module, we see that we use browser module. Great. But it could be not browser, it could be any other platform. So if we have as a task to migrate our code base to a new platform? And that could be quite problematic because we don't use, instead of like using the abstractions, we use the platform specific interface, which is not quite correct. So that's why I propose to use debug element in the following case. Great. So we could compare the text, which is like, that will be a quite simple test just to get started to see how can we write the unit test by using the TestBed. So we unwrap the native elements. We could easily access the DOM property and compare it with what we have here. Okay, we could use just a string, for example. Let's try to run it. And we received nothing. Great. Interesting. Let's see. Okay. It's not the text content, it's inner text, right? Okay, not a problem. Received undefined. Text. So what if we do like the following? I know it's not the solution. So let's check. We do perform the text changes each time. Okay. We do not perform any clicking. We just use the text changes. Okay, there is like warning messages because it throws the error because it doesn't know what the toolbar is. If you remember, we use material. That's interesting. And if you remember the unit test from the regular JavaScript, just the unit test concepts, we're testing only those entity that is under testing. So if we are on the header component spec file, then we're going to test only this component. I know that the component could introduce any third-party dependencies, including the third-party components as well. So, well, just to demonstrate, I will do like the following. We're not going to use my toolbar for now, or let's do like the following. So actually to fix this, yeah, obviously we need to import the necessary module. So in case if you're dealing with UI library, I don't think it's a problem just to use this third-party dependency. Yes, as we can see, everything works pretty fine. But what if we want introduce the third-party dependencies, but we want to fix this error? There are actually two cases. First, if this component does not really matter, so maybe for such purposes, we could switch other components. Yeah, for the beginning, I believe it's quite simple. I believe it's clear. Just before we move on, let's recap what we have. Configure testing module as the beginning that accepts the same property as regular ng module. It creates the feature, component feature, the special object that allow us to control the component behavior. Then we get our elements that we want to compare. In case if we need the regular DOM object, there is a property called native element, and that's it. We're asserting our condition. Yeah, as we can see, the dependencies could not be only the third-party component, but the service. In such a case, provider section is used. We're going to cover a specific file later on. I just want to go to this slide just to mention what things should be tested by the TestBed approach. So as you can see, I'm testing whether the text is correct, which is not quite good. But here is the list of such cases that should be tested by TestBed, including structural directives, attributes that changes the DOM structure, input-output properties, lifecycle hooks that could also affect our state and look and feel, and pipes of directives, because depending on the component state, they also affect our component template. And that is what exactly needs to be tested. Let's find another example of the components that could be covered by unit tests. So I believe that's this page is the right choice. So this is the item. This is actually the list. Okay, to the item we'll take a bit later. I will show you another approach. Okay, let's take this page. How are we going to cover this component? Well, it's actually dispatches something to the store, right? And we see that there is no elements, its own elements that are used. We use only our two components. And as you know, whenever we implement a unit test for a specific component, we're not using the real logic, right? We use stubs. And this is exactly what we want to achieve within our test. How can we actually achieve this? We could easily create a new component, inside our spec file. So if you remember, component is a regular TypeScript class with its selector. So we want first to create a stub to the following one. Okay, we're exactly specifying the same selector. Template, let's make it empty. It doesn't really matter. And this is the mock add to do component. What really matters is that it has the events that we need to trigger to cover this method by test. Okay, so output, we're specifying the output property with the same name as its regular component has. It should emit something, right? It should emit the to-do item. Okay, so we could like create the constant with the mock. Let's see what properties we have here. I will just copy the reference ID, title, assignee, due date is completed. Okay, I haven't installed for it here. It's quite complicated. It's completed. It's Boolean. true. Okay. It will fire the mock to do. No, sorry. Will it fire later? So let's try to create a new test case for such scenario. So we have the fixture, right? So first of all, we need to include our mock component to our declaration. So what components we need to mock? Actually, those components that has output bindings, event bindings, right? In case if our components relies on the particular one, in case if this component is used just for representation and it has only input binding, we don't really need to mock them. Instead, inside a configure test module, we can use the following. We could provide schemas. There are two of them. Custom error schema, which actually tells the compiler, okay, Angular, in case if you encounter the element that is not actually known by me, if it's not known component, so please ignore it. But it should have a proper naming. So if I'm not mistaken, we have also the description right here. Yes. So that's what's exactly I'm trying to say. So now we're testing the nested components. No error schema means like this is the any in terms of test bed, right? Custom element schema at least will check the validity of your markup in terms of elements name. So if I refer to the definition, I hope that's something. Yeah. Defines a schema that allows ng module to contain the following non-angular elements that could be web components. Why not? Each element has a proper naming. So each element follows the same naming convention and includes the dash syntax. So that's exactly what we want. We do know that this is the proper element. We know that, but we want to cover only one component. For now, in this particular case, two components are matter for this one in terms of testing, but we're assuming for now that we're going to test our component logic that is relies only on add to do without taking into account the second one. So after running the test, so at least let's try to do this. Yeah, we see that the test will not run because it will rely on one more third-party state, which is the NgRx store. Okay, what we can do here. So in this case, there is the provider that is called provide mock store. Here with the config we're providing the store, the global store. So remember that we have app and to-dos, right? Is that assignable mock store config? Okay. But anyway, provide mock store actually, well, it will look like the following. I'm a bit wrong. Yeah. So let's look the following. There are actually plenty of configuration, but mostly you will use initial state. So it will not do anything. Yeah, we just need to mock the third-party dependencies. And that is exactly one of the best pros whenever you will use TestBed in favor of just creation of the class instance. If you see it as the service, the spec file that is also created for services also uses TestBed. In some of the examples that you might found, you've seen as the service testing implemented in the way of instance testing. But I also recommend using TestBed in each case. For what? You already see that the component dependencies are getting injected through the DI, right? And to do the same in terms of injecting dependencies, the TestBed could help you. You don't need to recreate the full stops for your third-party dependencies. You need just to inject them. Okay, seems like now it's the test suite works. So it means that we mock the third-party dependencies correctly. So now we will try to cover with the unit test the following. Should add to do. Okay. First of all, need to get access to that element. As we did previously, we need debug element. Y directive. And this is mock app to do component. Why by directive? That's because we could do the following. We could use component instance. And then I'm not sure why, but it's also adds to do, which is the event emitter, invoke emit with our mock object. And then remember that change detection doesn't work automatically. We need to do this. Then we need somehow to check whether the appropriate action has been dispatched. To do so, we possibly need to have an instance of our store. So let's do that. This is mock store. And each time we initialize our module, we will also assign this store as an instance. Not sure. Yeah, from the generated spec file from the tests, you see that to get the instance of the dependency, use TestBed inject. Okay, let's do that. But we need not to do service. That's quite wrong. We need mock store. And let's see, what do we have? Well, there are two ways. First, we could just create a spy for the dispatch method, like doing the following. That's the easiest way. There is like spy on operator. Maybe we need to do the following. Store. So we're wrapping the dispatch methods of the mock store by the spy, and we could check its call. I've been called with, and we could pass here the action that is supposed to be dispatched whenever we're meeting the events. Oh, okay, I'm a bit nervous of running this, so yeah, I hope everything works as expected. Yeah, we see that it's worked. Great. That's another way. This the simplest, but not the least. There is also the way that the store has observable scans actions, which is actually the observable that could be used in case if you have several actions. But for the first time, we could keep with like having just a spy. I believe that is work. That should work. Okay, so we used our step. We get the access to that component through the component instance, and by getting this element by the component name, we trigger the events. We could actually like without doing this, we could actually do the following. We could try, as I mentioned previously, we could use trigger event handler as a way to trigger the events. So we could try running the test with the following invocation, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, the result, as you see, is the same. And I believe we could easily do nothing. We don't need event emitter anymore. Maybe let's just comment it just for the reference that there are two ways. Yeah, as you can see, trigger event handler is could be used not only for regular DOM events, but also for event emitter. Great. That's how we could implement the test for our components in case if it has nested, firing the events and affecting our regular component. Great. So let's see the message. What's to test in the service then? In the service, let's say we have to do service. Well, actually, we'll get to it a bit later, but okay. Still, if we are on the service, let's focus on it. We'll not get deeper into the service testing. Yeah, actually, in the service, you could have not only REST API invocation, but also some auxiliary logic. Let's say the mapping service, or a service could like handle the state management in case if you don't deal with the NgRx. That's possible. But I wanted to show you is that it could use there is the entire testing module for the HTTP. And in case if something goes wrong or you have additional mapping, you could use this module for testing. Well, I don't think we have much time since we're already an hour and 25 minutes. But in case if you need some additional materials about client testing, well, I will try to provide some additional examples. But in my understanding, it's not quite oftenly used. Yeah, again, it depends on the projects. But I was just trying to answer the question, what should we test in the services? We could test HTTP calls by using this, well, actually, maybe let's refer to the documentation, not to getting to it back later. So this is just API reference. HTTP testing. I thought that there is some guide on the Angular documentation. I'm just trying to, okay, testing services, great. Testing HTTP services. There is the entire module, as I mentioned. Okay. Yeah, it could be used as the regular class, but the more preferable way to my mind is to use like the entire module. So basically, what does it mean? It has its own dependency HTTP testing controller. And whenever we want to test the call, we use HTTP testing controller to define the request details and verify that the request has the correct URL and the correct response data. Well, because it's quite a big topic, yeah, we'll skip it for now. And we'll get to another stuff. So you already like see that inside of the spec file, we could create as many components. We could create the component classes as we want, right? So there is another approach that is quite similar. So I just want to find my slides. This is called the test host approach. So this approach that we've used is designed for such components, for wrapper components, I would say, that doesn't have anything, but it's had nested components. In case if you want to test some components that has input bindings, perhaps you need to use test host approach. How it looks like. Perhaps we will not like write these tests in our case because it's quite similar. I will just refer to my examples. If I'm not mistaken, it should be somewhere with the widget publication card. Yes, exactly the following one. So as we see, publication card is the component that has input-output bindings. So it could be the representational component, right? So to test such components, we use test host approach. So what does it mean? Instead of providing this component as the component that we're going to test, instead we're going to create a separate component that will be called test host component. And in the template, it will include this, this component, right? So we could use this test host for passing any data, for checking, for assigning this event handler as the spy, and so on and so forth. The test host approach could be used also for testing directives and pipes. I don't have like this the example right here, but if I will like, let's say we have the following file that's from the real project. Okay, we're testing the directive, and we use the same test host approach. We configure our test host component, and we see how this exact directive will influence our behavior. Uh, well, I believe it's quite clear because, well, um, we don't have much time, and I wanted also to show you some other stuff. Okay, uh, let's stop for a moment. Yep, seems like there is no any new questions from the chat, but maybe you wanted to ask me something right now before we move on. I promise that I will not take much time. I just wanted to show you some other techniques in terms of NgRx testing. Okay, I believe that's clear. So let's recap. What's building blocks we have? So components, I believe it's quite clear. We have a smart component that could be used by, could be tested by mocking the nested components by creation of this class, and dump components or representational or widget components that could be tested by creation of the test host, right? Just in case, I will like provide the link with the examples of tests. That's also includes test host approach for your reference. Great. Uh, yeah, this is exactly what I were describing in terms of the hooks. Now I wanted to show in terms of other building blocks. So what else do we have? Ng modules, well, actually it doesn't supposed to cover by any test. Components were already covered. Directive and pipes, as I mentioned previously, it could be at least directives. Directive could be covered by the test host approach. And as for the pipes, well, actually you could use both test host approach, or you could cover just by creation of the instance and triggering the transform. But in case if you want to check in terms of if you remember, a pipe could be pure or impure, depending on the change detection strategy, right? So in case if you want to fully ensure that everything works correctly in terms of purity of the pipe, yeah, again, you could also use test house approach. But yeah, the approaches for testing could be like discussed in the teams, but the pipes could be like tested also by creation of the instance right here. As you see, whenever we create the pipe we generated by NgCli, it creates just a class instance right here. And if we write the test case, we could like invoke pipe transform and compare the result. Um, okay, so services. Well, as for the services, it's more or less similar with the pipes, with such exceptions that by default, the spec files are getting generated with the TestBed configuration. The same approach could be used for pipes as well, in case if it has some third-party dependencies that are injected through the CI. Oh, sorry, through the DI. Why CI? Dependency injection, remember. So to simplify the DI process, you could use TestBed, right? Yeah. So the service testing is also not complicated. You simply get the instance of the service and test each method. Okay, but what I wanted to show you is another techniques that could be used for some cases. In our case, it could be used for testing our store. Let's consider our app reducer. It has the global state with is loading property. We want to test that upon dispatching the action, our store will be handled properly. How can we do? Again, well, I propose like to have the following structure. Inside the reducers, we create tests folder and just create a file called app reducer.spec.ts. Okay. Make a bit bigger. Okay. Done. Remember that the reducer is a pure function. Let's create the task case. But first, we need our reducer function. Okay. So we need to import it. Okay. Should set loading state. Okay. Simply it's a result. Yeah, if you remember, reducer in the first takes as the first argument current state, and the second one is the action. The first argument will be initial state, and the second one will be our action. But first we need to import those actions. Well, I'm not using TypeScript aliases, so that's why I have such kind of imports. Okay, app actions, set loading state. Okay, we're setting to true, right? So what we're expecting? Okay, that's interesting. So let's export it. It's not reducer, it's app reducer, sorry. Okay, so we're expecting that's the result, the property in the result is loading is equal true. It's pretty simple when we have only one property. And what if your state has several, like tens of properties, hundreds of properties? It could be a nightmare. Yeah, see, as we have a warning, but the test itself is passed. And what you have numerous, huge amount of properties. It could be nightmare to list, but just imagine you'll have to test like this. That is not our case. So to avoid such usage of numerous amount of expects, there is the thing in Jest that is called snapshot testing. Basically, how to use it. We write expect condition and use the following matcher to match snapshot. And then when we run this unit test, it will generate inside the folder another folder that is called snapshots. But for some reason, it's not showing for now. But we could do the following. We see it's created the new file that is called .snap. That's actually our snapshot for the following test case, right? So instead of listing every property of the store, we could check the entire state by just one snapshot. I think that's really great. So in case if something goes wrong with our reducer, let's say, let's change something here and try to run one more time, the test will fail because it doesn't match our snapshot. Okay, see? The snapshot is different from what we have, and that's why the entire unit test failed. But we could update our snapshot in case if we do sure that this is intended changes and we want to update our snapshot with the latest changes. And I believe that's really great. Snapshot testing could be applied for reducers as well as for actions. We could create the same, well, actually, each snapshot testing consists like the following. You align performing the action, and whenever you want to assert, you takes the entire object to be checked. Then you run the unit test. In case if you don't have snapshot file, it will be generated automatically. In case if you want to update your snapshot and you're sure that you made correct changes, so you could update this snapshot automatically. But by default, if these are not the same, it will fail. Okay, so we see that snapshot testing is really useful thing that could be used for reducer and for action, because action is the object consisting of the following properties. So just for the example, I'll just do the following. Action test. It actually could have several properties. The type, which is the string, and which exact property we will pass right here. So we could like create the action as the following and check whether the action is correct. But maybe you have a question. Why do we need the unit test for action separately? So that's exactly the same question. Why do we actually need the unit test? Let's assume, well, without any assumptions, I will just say that the unit test is the mechanism that will prevent you from unintended changes. Let's say you suddenly change the entire description of the actions, right? And because of that, the reducer will not work because you have some unintended changes, and that's the mechanism that prevents you from breaking your system without knowing it. And as I mentioned previously, it will help you keeping you sane. That's why we need unit tests. So we see that snapshot testing could cover actions and reducers. And what about effects? It actually introduces Well, I promise that's the last thing for today. I know that we already spent a lot of time today, but yeah, I promise that's the last thing because, well, I believe that could be important. Um, so effects. In terms of effects, we see this is observable. Yeah, we need to test observable. Great. Um, I will again show you how to test these things in two ways. Again, we'll create tests folder, and this will be to do effects spec.ts. I don't want to add this to my Git staging for right now. Um, okay. What we need here. So perhaps we need TestBed because well, let's see what dependencies we have here. We have store to do service and actions, which actually pushes each actions that is dispatched through the store. So we definitely will need the TestBed for each. So if we remember the previous things, so TestBed configure test module. Okay, we definitely need TestBed. First, we'll just copy like we need mock store. As the dependency in case if we need to test it. We need our effects. That is actually definitely we need actions. Yes. And we need to configure it. So this will come to providers. Mock store and mock actions. I believe we don't need any config. Just in case we'll provide an empty object. In case if we need to providers and also to do affects. Then we configured our test module. Then we simply do this inject store. Do the same with actions and with affects. Okay, seems like we're ready. Yeah, most likely also we need to mock our to-do service. But yeah, as you remember, we need to create a stop for it. Why not? Okay, mock to-do service. It uses several methods, but I do think we don't need to test them all. We will just get only one method, which is get to do. Let it return just empty array for testing. But yeah, it should return something, not just an empty array, definitely. Okay, we also need to provide it. To the service class to the service. Wait. So now we're good to go. It should fetch to this. Okay. Great. So if we refer to the NgRx testing, I'm not sure it proposes this approach. Yeah, this. Yeah, because I just wanted to propose like the more simple approach, and it's just okay. It's observable. Okay. So we want to test this section, and we expect that's because our service will return observable. We do the following. We assign actions with our actions observable with our observable of load to this. Since we're dealing with asynchronous operations, perhaps we need some callback. Each test case accepts the callback done. If we provide it, we need to invoke it to finalize the test. If we don't do that, the test will count as failed. And then we'll see. So we invoked load to do's. We want to subscribe to our effect. And we want to compare that's the action that is returned from our effect. So maybe do the following. Equal, let's import maybe, it's already imported to the actions. Load to do success. We pass the empty array here because we already do this previously. Let's do the following. I almost forgot it each time. I'm sorry if in case if the text is too small. Aha, you see, we didn't invoke done fallback, and that's because that's why it's shown the timeout. To do so, need to invoke done. And then everything should be good. So the action that is returned from this effects should be equal. And we see that everything is great. By testing the effects, we're checking the conditions. So in case if the response is success, the effect should return but to do success action. In case if not, then we need to create a separate test case for the failure. What I wanted to show you, yeah, again, that's worth adding to materials as well. So this is the simple way of testing effects. Yeah, don't worry. We're recording the entire workshop. Yeah. What I wanted to show you is that there is one more cool feature that will simplify the testing, which is called the marble testing. Perhaps you heard about it. Well, I don't quite remember. I already opened this link somewhere, but okay, marble syntax. That's a quite advanced library for testing observables. I could also leave the link to it. In scope of our workshop, I will not get deeper dive into the marble testing, but just to show that there is such possibility. Actually, what the marble testing is. So, let's just find something quite simple. Here the list uh, of the syntax. You see that there is the strange syntax with dots, with pipes, and so on and so forth. It has its own description, but in a few words, uh, it describes each frame. By frame, it means that the value that is pushed to this observable. I already found the example that we could consider right now. Let's say to create this marbled observable, we use such string and marble syntax. Here, we simply tell uh, that this observable will emit uh, 6 values, but the matters only 2 of them. It's A and B. And we simply want to check that at these frames, the values A and B will be exactly the same. And the pipe symbol means that observable is completed. That's for the instance. Yeah, you could if you are interested in marble testing, you could read it. And the marble testing is oftenly used whenever we deal with observable. So we could use it for testing our effects. So we don't need done callback anymore. We could do the following. For the actions, we provide hot observable. If you remember the observables module, hot and cold. Hot observable is actually any kind of subject, and cold, yeah, so maybe that's a high time to revise the knowledge about hot and cold observables in case if you missed that. Okay, so basically, what do we want to do? We're pushing the action. We're describing that, but actually we could provide any other letter here. Let's say A. It will be the following. Sorry, not this. And this will be action that we dispatch into our store. Then we create like expected, and this will be called observable. Again, it will have the same signature, but the output value will be different. It will be our result. Okay. And then we can do the following. So expected goes here, and we expect that our effects fetch to do will actually be our expected observable. So Let's try to run this test. And as we can see, it's successful. Okay, I just wanted to show that there is such things as marble testing if it comes to the observables, and it could be extremely useful to deal with such things. And as you know, that the most of the features, the Angular observable or RxJS enabled. So that's why if you want to cover them with unit tests, or perhaps you need marble testing implemented. Um, the questions from the chat. Where you post links to workshop records? Because I do not see in Discord. Well, I also don't see the records from the previous workshops, but I promise that whenever I will finish it, and we're going to finish it really soon, so the link will be posted to the announcements and to the YouTube channel. I don't know why the previous lecturers didn't post the recordings, but yeah, this one will be definitely posted to the announcements channel as well to the YouTube channel RS School in English. It will be available right here, so don't worry, you will not miss anything. Great. So as I promised, that's it for today. So we covered a bit of NgRx and store management. We spoke about some tricky cases and features that are hiding under the hood. We also implemented unit testing for components and for main building blocks of the Angular application. So, guys, I believe that's it. We already like 2 hours already passed. I hope that's it will be useful. So we could take some time right now in case if you still have some questions or you're curious about something. That's about the time if you didn't ask it previously to do it right now before we wrap up our today's webinar. Question, where does the functions it describe came from? I don't see them in imports. That came from the setup files. So here, well, actually, this setup file uh, under the hood, it does the following. Um, um, well, I don't think we need to take too deeper, but whenever you're running the test, it actually sets these functions to the global scope. Yes, definitely you could configure your test suite in such a way that you need to import these functions each time. But by default, since I enable Jest in the project and it uses its global setup, it will add these functions to the global scope so that I don't need to import them each time. By the way, link to, uh, uh, well, perhaps you already have the link to the following repository, but just in case, if you lost the link for some reason or you didn't find it, don't worry. I will also post this link to the to this repo with the updated commits so that you could refer to our today's examples. Okay, any other questions? Well, I believe that's everything was clear and that's what's useful for you for better understanding of the topics that we have covered today. Well, in case if you don't have any other questions, I believe that you're tired being 2 hours on a webinar. Believe me too. So thank you for your attention. Thank you. In case if you want to ask me something, please let's connect via Discord. In case if something is not clear, okay, you're welcome. For now, we're wrapping up. Again, thanks everyone, and have a great evening.